So, happy to be back on stage and particularly to be with not a titan. I think the title, yes, titan.
A titan in his own mind, Richard.
I agree. So a tycoon.
A titan.
And are you happy with tycoon?
No, my mother would be, but if she was still around. But
Martin Sorrell, Sir Martin Sorrell, is not just a very dear friend for almost 25 years.
Known you for too long, Richard.
Too long. For 25 years. But he is also a mentor. And I had the privilege for almost a decade to have Sir Martin as an investor in my own...
I never was prepared to go to control because I thought you were uncontrollable.
in my company. So it's really my privilege to have this conversation with Sir Martin, who, by the way, do not need any introduction, but please allow me to, even if he's too humble...
Make it short.
No, I will not make short. I think it's important for people to know that today you are the chairman, the executive chairman of S4 Capital, and in a few minutes you have to tell us more about this new venture, which is doing extremely well. But Sir Martin was a founder and CEO of WPP for 33 years, which is the #1 global communication firm in the world today. And he took that...
Actually, it's been surpassed by the French.
Oh, really? Already?
Our market cap.
Our market cap, yes.
Our market cap, which was, we were always very... I think we reached about $22 billion at its height. And now WPP is about 10.
Yeah, because you left.
And Publicis has gone from 10 to 20, which is anathema to me.
Which never happened when you were running the show.
No.
You would never leave that
No.
to happen. But anyway, as WPP, impressive numbers, because from £1 million share company in 1985, Martin has led WPP to become, yes, the world's largest advertising company. And when, as you said perfectly well, when you were leading WPP and when you left in April of 2018, WPP had market capitalization of £16 billion, £16 billion pounds.
Right.
Revenues of over £15 billion, profits of approximately $2 billion, and over 200,000 people in...
Yeah, that was a bit of a cheat. We had 130,000 in companies that we owned 100% of, and if you included where we had minority interests, or more than 51%, where we had minority interests, it was up to 200,000.
And you were ranked as the second best performing CEO in the world by the Harvard Business Review in 2016 and 2017. Who was #1?
It varied actually. I think it was H&M and Zara. I think maybe it was Zara one year. I'm trying to remember who else it was. There was somebody else who, but the reason that happened is that I've been doing it for such a long period of time. That's the way it worked out.
And of course, he has been nominated as one of the Time 100 most influential people. And last but not least, you are still a director of Bloomberg Philanthropies.
Yes, Michael does incredible philanthropic work. You know, he has a very focused... I mean, he is I think, the exemplar for philanthropy because he has a very focused strategy. I mean, he gives contributions to large numbers of things, but the foundation has been very successful. And most people in his position can't give it away. It's interesting, they can't give it away fast enough. And I think there's this feeling amongst philanthropists that if they leave it to trustees or lawyers or accountants, those people wouldn't embody the values that they have. It's interesting talking to people, not Michael, but people in a similar situation, you get that.
Like Warren Buffett and others?
No, I wasn't thinking about Warren. I mean, you know, he's got a different way of dealing with it by giving it away. But it's interesting. I mean, the wealth that's being accumulated at that level is so huge that, you know, it has problems, and the returns that the fund managers have made are so significant. I mean, Michael has given away, I think it was a total of about $5 billion given to John Hopkins.
Yeah, amazing.
You know, because that's of his mother and alma mater, etc., Penn and everything. So, anyway.
In all these years we know each other, I never ask you a question.
Yeah.
Who are or is the person who inspired you the most?
My dad. Well, you know, so that question comes in other forms. You know, who would you like to have dinner with? So
I like that question.
Yeah, so three people, and my three people would be my dad, because he sadly died of cancer when he was 74. So I felt I was robbed, but you know, he was Jewish family, and he referred to the Talmud, and 70 years, that was lifespan. So he felt he had had his life. Left school at 13, son of a probably Ukrainian. I think it was Kiev or Lvov. My grandparents on my father's side came to the UK in 1899. I found their wedding certificate, crosses on it, 4 witnesses, crosses on it. So East End Jews, left school at 13, etc. So self-made. So 1, JFK would be number 2, and Golda Meir would be number 3. I recommend everybody to watch.
Why JFK?
Well, JFK was seminal for me because in 1963, assassinated, I was on Magdalen Bridge in Cambridge, and with Simon Sharma, the famous. He and I were there when we met a Swedish student at Christ College, Cambridge, with us, who told us that Kennedy had been assassinated. And then in '64, we went to the Democratic National Convention to report, as the magazine was called New Cambridge. It was a new magazine at Cambridge. And we reported, went to the platform hearings. Jack Plum, who was Professor Plum, famous historian, arranged for us. Dan Moynihan was the New York State Senator, and he arranged for us to go to the Democratic National Convention, where Bobby Kennedy, who at that time was still alive, and his brother were on the platform hearings. And Simon and I went and reported on the platform hearings, and we went to Atlantic City, famous convention because the poster outside was for Goldwater, and where it read, "In your heart, you know he's right." That was a famous political slogan, which was unsuccessful. Not like Labour isn't working with Sarches, which was, you know, I came on to later. So it's JFK, and the third one would be Golda Meir. And I would recommend everybody to watch
The documentary.
the Netflix Yom Kippur, because the parallels to what is happening in
Correctly.
Gaza are amazing. I mean, for example, the intelligence breach. I don't know whether it's true. I didn't check it out, but in the film they describe the Israelis had a technology device to follow what the Egyptian army was doing, and they tested it the week before the Yom Kippur War, and they turned it off. It worked, and they turned it off.
And
So-
they were taken by surprise.
and they were well, the arrogance, you know, when slightly different. Then I was in Israel in April when my grandkids were being bar mitzvahed and bat mitzvahed there, and you know, I came back from that trip really depressed because the country was, you know, I got off the plane, and the guy who met me, I said, "What do you think of Netanyahu?" He said, "Awful." I get into the car as a young legal student who was driving me around. "What do you think of Netanyahu?" Wonderful. That encapsulated in a second the split in Israel.
Yes, it's
And if
divided.
there's anything good that's come out of what's happened, it's the country is now united.
Let's go back to your core business,
Yeah.
the world of advertising, communication. Before
Yeah.
we talk about S4 Capital,
Yeah.
how do you see today the advertising industry?
Well, it's going through very significant change. Actually, it's an interesting question in the context of what's happening currently. So if you look at the platforms, there really are, the numbers never lie, right? So the worldwide media market is about 950 billion. Google, digital is about 650. So it's about 60%, 65%, depending on whose numbers you believe. And by 2025, it'll be 70%. So digital will be 70%, the lion's share. This year is really interesting because the divergence between linear, so it is quite extraordinary that Bob Iger, who came back to Disney, would announce during the Sun Valley conference on CNBC that he was going to sell ABC or partner with it and ESPN and Hotstar and everything else. It shows you how pressurized linear is. And in Q3 of this year, for example, Warner, Zaslav's Warner Discovery, or Discovery Warner, was down 14% in ad revenues. The networks, the linear networks that had sports, like Fox and Disney, to buttress them, because live sports still is, as we know in the context of Saudi Arabian PIF development, live sports is critically important. That buttresses it a bit, but they still lose about 2 or 3 or 4%. So this year, on average, linear TV will lose about 10% of their ad revenues. The platforms, on the other hand, despite the fact that their marketing spends have been under pressure, for example, the case of Meta in Q3, their marketing spend was down 25%. The platforms, the big platforms, and there are 6, so I'll go through who they are up about 10%. So you have a 20-point difference. I can remember when I was running WPP in the UK newspapers and magazines in 2 years lost 25% in each year, so about 50% overall of their ad revenues. So we've seen this compression before, but it's very marked this year. And the reason for it this year is the packaged goods companies in an inflationary environment have managed to price up. So Pepsi in Q2 increased its prices about 15%. They fixed their ad budgets on net revenues. So if your revenues are up by 15%, your ad budget's going to be up by 15%, you maintain brand. That money has gone into the digital platforms. So Google this year will be $225 billion. Meta will be 125, so that's 350. Wow. Amazon will be 50. So it's 400 out of 650 in the 3 Western platforms. The 3 main, yeah. Yeah, Alibaba and Tencent, the data is not there, but we know that TikTok, as part of ByteDance, will probably be about 90 billion this year versus 60 last year, including China. Ex-China, outside China, TikTok will have gone from 10 to 14 billion. But the numbers are really important. Everybody talks about Twitter. Twitter was 5 billion when Musk took it over. It's now probably about 2. Maybe 2.5 is publicly admitted. It's probably gone down because of the anti-Semitism row that's going on. Snap is about 5.5, Pinterest about 4, Walmart with its walled garden about 3, Microsoft is probably 11, Apple 7. And Microsoft and Apple, driven by AI and gaming, Activision, Blizzard, etc., will become more and more important. But the 6 fundamentals are the 3 Western and the 3 East. Yeah, and they are.
How do you see the future of TikTok?
Well, are we on to Chatham House here? We're not on Chatham House, so I probably shouldn't say. But my view is that TikTok should stay private. That by sticking its head above the parapet, by going public, you have this problem about privacy, brand safety, and political influence. And they've defended it well by saying the servers are not located in China, the servers are outside China, there's separation. My view is they should keep their heads down, and they should not go public. Maybe they need it for employee reasons or whatever, but if I was them, the platform is very powerful. I mean, we had previous speakers talking about news. The Gen Z consumes its news we've seen in the Gaza Israeli war. We've seen how young people's views of the world are shaped in a totally different. It's not CNN anymore, with all due respect to CNN. It's TikTok, and that's how they shape their
their opinion.
Yeah, their opinions. And you've seen that markedly in what's been happening sadly in the last couple of months. So it's a very different environment. But coming back to what we're trying to do at S4, we're purely digital. I'm not
Tell us more about S4, please.
So
why S4 and what is the core business of S4?
4 generations of Sorrells, my grandparents, my parents, myself, and my kids. So 4.
Four
Maybe
S.
I have grandkids now, so maybe it should be
You
S5.
should be 5.
S5. Digital only, data driven. I mean, for any CMOs in the audience, if they were, or CIOs or CTOs, what would the advice be? Agility is key inside organizations given technological change. Take back control. Strange coming from an ad guy, an agency guy, but you need to control, in a digital world, you need to control your data. And the third area is first-party data. Google is decapitating third-party cookies, deprecating third-party cookies. Apple has built IP addresses into cohorts, so you don't get individual addresses, you get cohorts of people who share the same demographics. Control of first-party data and use of that with the signals, critically important. So the 3 key factors with data at its core, because AI is driven, the oil or renewables, if more fashionable way of putting it, for AI is data. That's the driver. So first-party data, plus the signals from the platforms, absolutely critical. That's why the retailers are going to retail advertising. So S4 is about digital only, because that's where the growth is. Data-driven. Going to market is faster, better, more efficient. And a unitary brand. You could
Precisely.
You took the holding companies are multiple brands.
Yeah.
I don't think that works. Clients want access. We have 8,500 people in 32 countries, 57 offices. That's happened in 4 years, basically. We want our clients to be able to access everything we do, everywhere we do it. And AI, there are 5 things that AI is doing to our industry. Firstly, it's improving productivity on visualization and copywriting. So what took us 3 weeks takes us 30 hours.
3 hours.
Okay. That's a mixed blessing because client procurement departments will say we want a piece of that. So that's a plus and a minus. The second area is hyper-personalization. It was referred to in one of the previous sessions, the Netflix model, which is a first-party data-driven model using the signals from the platforms, is the critical model. I think I'm right in saying, I think it's Coca-Cola actually, have said that in China, they would, for example, they would like to have one message, an individual message, for every one of the 1.2 billion consumers. You might think that's impossible, but in an era of AI, we've already done it with Spotify, actually. There's a case study that we have where we've done it with Spotify already. You can develop individual messages through using first-party data. Third-party data is of no value anymore, in my view. First-party data, client data, approved by consumers, you get over the safety issues and privacy issues, and with the signals. So that's critically important. So faster, better, more efficient, we go to market as, and we go as a unitary brand with clients having access to what we're doing.
We have over time, but I cannot have this conversation without asking you a question. When we were working together, you and I shared the same conviction of the power of branding nations. We're here in Hong Kong. What is the advice you will give to Hong Kong authorities to rebrand Hong Kong?
Well, I make it, as this is about Hong Kong and about the Middle East and Saudi Arabia, what the kingdom is doing is something that we have never seen before. I mean, we've seen, in a way, we've seen a rebranding. Deng Xiaoping rebranded China, if you like. I think President Xi is rebranding China again in a different way, with more political emphasis rather than economic emphasis. But what the kingdom is doing, and maybe Singapore is another example, is on a scale that we have never seen before. The vision is huge. And it's about changing, the leader of a nation, if they wanted to rebrand a nation, would pick on the Olympics, pick on the World Cup, being Formula One. Those were the 3 events.
And the Expo now.
And the Expo, right, and the Expo. So you pick on that. What the kingdom is doing it in a much more subtle and all-enveloping way. It's actually changing the cultural view of the kingdom. I remember the Crown Prince addressed a conference and he referred to Saudi or the Middle East being the new Europe.
The new Europe.
And remember, everybody got up. There was a lot of sword waving and a lot of jumping up and down. You know, in a sense, it's even broader than Europe. I mean, it's in a fragmented world, in an increasingly deglobalized or fragmented world, these relationships are shifting. And what the kingdom is about, in my view, is establishing the Saudi nation on a world stage. It's not even Europe. It's on a world stage as a world power. Because if you or I were running any of these countries, what we would do is play both ends off against the middle. And that's what you're going to see happening and increasing. Now, as far as Hong Kong is concerned, you know, I've been here for 48 hours, so you have to take everything I say.
But you know very well Asia.
Yes, I used to come to China 6 times a year. And we would go into the hinterland of China, because the Chinese government were trying to encourage people away from not away from, but in addition to the coastal plain, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, obviously Shanghai and Beijing, go to Chengdu, Chongqing, etc. We used to do that. We went and saw a number of companies, tremendous traction that we got from it. But what Hong Kong, you know, I've been back here for 48 hours, and I haven't been here for about 3 or 4 years. It is remarkably vibrant. It is remarkably exciting. The physical environment is stimulating. It is like New York or Shanghai, right? It is maybe on an even bigger scale because it's so concentrated. The perception worldwide is totally different. The perception is one of a much more, a more negative one. So the advice would be, you should put together an integrated campaign. Government campaigns are often not good because different ministers have different priorities. And this is an ad for the UK. The best government advertising is the Great British Campaign. And I say that a little bit because I was involved with it in its beginnings. But what it does, it's a template that every minister uses in the same way.
To be aligned.
Yeah. And integration, and this is something for the kingdom as well, PIF, integration of marketing messages in a cohesive way, instead of people going in different directions. I mean, PIF's investment in Richard Attias and Associates is a good example of that. Integrating the thing. I mean, if you should be doing every event in Saudi and beyond, and integrating it into a cohesive, not having people going off in different directions. And there are so many examples of governments, you know, because ministers have relationships with agencies, there's history, there might be coalitions. If you have a coalition government, everybody's going in different ways. The important thing is to impose, if I can use that word, a template that people use in a cohesive and coordinated way. But Hong Kong, in my view, you know, listening to the speeches from John Lee, for example, should up its game, I think, if I can be, I'm a visitor here, so I have to be a bit careful, but should up its game in terms of communication about the strength of Hong Kong. In the context, it's different to what it was before, in the context of development in Shanghai, in Shenzhen, in Guangzhou, you know, as the Bay Area.
The Bay, yeah.
Yeah. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Martin Sorrell.
Thank you
so much. Thank you, Martin.